Hi class, we're going to go over how to set up a forest. So the first thing you need to do is connect to ACE-IT. I created a user account specifically for this class, so I'm going to log in. So if you have any labs over here already, you need to make sure that you go to all the labs over here and deactivate them. If you have 3, you need to delete at least one of them so you can copy over the new lab. So once you have a space for the new lab, choose this lab from the drop-down and say copy to my labs. Once it's copied, activate it. Now that it's activated, I'm going to scroll down and you can see that I have the same lab that we had in the classroom. So I had the powers that be give us more resources on ACE-IT lab. So what I'm going to do is boot up one machine at a time. If we start booting up too many at a time, it's just going to take forever for them to boot. So I'm going to turn on parent DC1. I'm going to pause the video while this boots. Okay class, the machine is booted, so I'm going to sign in for the first time. I press Control-Alt-Boot button to get to this screen. So first thing I'm going to do is assign an IP address. I'm going to go over the subnetting scheme when we set up sites, but what I did was I created three subnets using VLSM, variable length subnet mask. So not all my subnets will have the same subnet mask. I'll go over that later. But if you look at the network diagram, you can see that I used 172.16.0.2 and my subnet mask, because I'm a /21, is 255.255.248. And our gateway for this site will be 172.16.0.2. And I'm just going to point to I'm just going to point to the Google as upstream. These will eventually become forwarders, and this will be replaced with the loopback address. So like always, the next thing we're going to do is rename the computer. All lowercase, no spaces. I'm just going to stick to the names that were used here in the network diagram, replacing the spaces with hyphens. Let it reboot. I'm going to pause while it's rebooting. Okay, it's rebooted. I'm going to press Control-Alt-Delete to sign in. Again, you can't press Control-Alt-Delete on your keyboard. You have to use that button. This is going to be our first domain in the forest, so what I'm going to do is install the Active Directory software. I got to wait till that bar stops. Click on Manage, Add Roles and Features. I'm going to choose Active Directory Domain Services, install all the tools needed, restart if needed. In this case, after we're done promoting, that's when it will restart. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, it's done installing software, so now I'm going to promote it to be the first domain in the forest. It's called the root domain. So our root domain is going to be called contoso.com. Just like our domain, our forest is the security context. So we're going to have one enterprise admin, and that enterprise admin is going to be able to control any machine in the domain and any machine in any other domain that we create after this. So this will be the first domain in our forest. This first domain is going to be special because it's going to have additional groups that other domains in the forest won't have, and I'll show you those groups once I set up. So I'm going to put in the recovery password. This recovery password is unique for each domain controller. I'm using the standard password. We don't need to worry about delegations just yet. Right now, I don't control Google's DNS server, so I'm not able to actually create this on Google's DNS server. It's actually going to create it on this machine. My NetBIOS name for my domain. Now I'm going to click install, then I'm going to pause the video because it's going to take a few minutes. Okay, it's rebooted after creating the domain, so I'm going to press Control-Delete, sign in, then pause again because it's going to take a few minutes. Because it's the first sign in with the new account, the new domain account. I'm going to pause again. Oh, that was quick. So right now we're working on setting up this machine. We're going to move on to this machine next. This is going to be an additional domain controller for the root domain. Okay, so now my console's up and ready to be worked on. So I'm going to go to Tools. The last thing I need to do is fix the DNS. From previous classes, you'll know that the forward lookup zone is automatically created for us and configured for us, but the reverse zone is not. So I'm going to go to the reverse zone, create a new reverse zone, and I'm going to create a primary zone. It will be stored in Active Directory. Primary zone means that it will be read-write, and I'm going to make a change here. Because I'm going to have multiple domains, there's no reason for me to maintain multiple reverse zones. So I'm just going to create one reverse zones for all my sites and then copy it to all domains. So I'm going to choose this option. So every domain controller that's a DNS server within my force, regardless of the domain, will get this zone. It's going to be for an IPv4 network. And I'm going to go to our classful address. So it'll work for any site, meaning it'll work for this subnet or this subnet or this subnet, because they all start with 172.16. There's my three subnets: 172.16.0.0/21. For my WAN link, it'll be 172.16.16.0/30. This WAN link, I only need two usable IP addresses, one for that point and one for that point. And for this subnet, it's going to be 172.16.8.0/21. I'll go through and show you how I did the VLSM. So I'm back to my DC. I'm going to create a reverse lookup zone for my classful address. It's going to allow dynamic updates, DDNS. Click Finish. I'm going to open up a PowerShell. I'm going to change the font so you can actually see it. Then I'm going to type register-DNS client. So it creates a pointer record for my DC. I only need to do this on the first machine because this wasn't created when this machine was booted. I could just reboot this machine, but that's kind of a overkill for what I need to do. So my reverse is set up. I'm going to go to Tools. I'm going to go to Active Directory Users and Computers. And because this is my root domain, I have two groups that no other domain will have in my forest. Enterprise admins. If I go into that group, the member is my admin account for this domain. So this domain admin account is also a domain admin and an enterprise admin, meaning this account can create new domains. So if I create other domains within this forest, that account cannot be used to create additional domains. It can be only used for managing those domains. The enterprise admin account can create additional domains and can manage all those domains as well. For that reason, you need to keep this root domain very secure. A lot of companies will create a root domain, not put any users in it. They create a child domain, and then at that point put all the users in the child domain to keep this group secure. The other group that I have is this Schema Admin. Think of a schema as a dictionary. It defines what an object is. When you look at a user account, it's going to have a name field, it's going to have a login field, it's going to have a manager field, an address field. Those are attributes for a user account. Now, when you look at a computer account, it's going to have different attributes. That's what the schema defines, what attributes each type of object has. The issue with the schema is it's a one-way change. So if you make a change to the schema, you can't reverse it. So you need to be very careful making schema changes. In fact, Microsoft prevents the utility from running until you run a special command. And at that point, when you reboot the machine, you have to rerun the command to change the schema. They don't want people to mess with the schema. The only account that can change the schema is a member of this group. Right now, that account is the domain admin for the root domain. So you can have additional domain admins for other domains within your forest, but only this account can make changes to the schema. Only this account can make changes throughout the domain plus create new domains. So it's very important that you keep these two groups secure. When we create child domain controllers, we're going to see that these groups don't exist on any other domain. So now I'm going to go over to parent DC2, boot that machine up. I'm going to pause the video while that boots. Okay, my second domain controller is booted, so I'm going to sign in. The IP addresses that we're going to use are right here on the network diagram. So the next IP we're going to use is .3/21. Our gateway is the router on that site, which is, if I go to the diagram, it's right there. It has an IP address of 172.16.0.1/21, which is not configured just yet. So I'm going to put in my first DC as the DNS server. It already knows about Contoso.com. So if I try to point this to the upstream servers, it would actually create a new forest. I don't want to do that. I just want to add an additional domain controller to an existing domain. So these domain controllers will essentially be equal. I could go to either one and create a user account for Contoso.com. There are some changes which we'll go over to after we have our sites configured, but for right now, for all intents and purposes, they're both equal. And again, I'm going to stick to the same naming scheme that I did on the first DC. All lowercase, parent DC2. Click OK. Guys, you don't want to join this machine to the domain. You don't join domain controllers to the domain. You promote them to be domain controllers. So don't put Contoso.com here. If you do, it's just going to make promoting it longer, because what it's going to do is unjoin it from the domain before it promotes it to a domain controller. Going to reboot after renaming. Going to sign back in. And then install the Active Directory software. I have to wait till the bar stops going before I can install anything. Okay, it's gone. So I'm going to go to Manage, Add Roles and Features. Now guys, you can do this with PowerShell. Server 2019, a lot of times you'll come across errors where this will fail. If it fails installing something, press cancel and go through the procedure again. So I'm going to pause this while it is installing the software. Okay, it's done installing, so now we're going to, I just wanted to make sure I was recording. So now we're going to promote it to a domain controller. We're going to add a domain controller to an existing domain. The domain is Contoso.com. Click Change. Type in Contoso. Administrator. Make sure you use the backslash and not a /. If I click Next and it doesn't work, the problem most likely exists because you either have your IP settings wrong or you're not pointing the DNS to the first DC. If I point this DNS server to Google, Google doesn't know about Contoso.com, so it's not going to be able to resolve the IP addresses. You need to make sure that you point this DC to the first domain controller for DNS. Click Next. So guys, this global catalog, kind of think of this as a cloud that hovers over the entire forest. When you query for an object in a different domain, the global catalog is what handles that request. So the global catalog will know about all objects in all attributes for all objects for the parent DC, because the global catalog is on the first DC. It will also know about all objects in most attributes for all the other domains. Now, the rule of thumb is you don't want to have a lot of global catalogs, because you end up creating replication traffic between these global catalogs that might not really be necessary. If you have relatively small sites, you really only need one global catalog server per site. If you only have one site, I would have at least 2 global catalog servers. Some people put a global catalog server on every domain controller, which is fine, but then I think you cause a lot of replication traffic that you really don't need. So for this case, I'm going to have one global catalog over here that handles this site, and one global catalog over here that handles this site. I could put a global catalog on all these machines, but that's going to create a lot of replication traffic. So I'm going to uncheck that. If I wanted to, I could make this a read-only domain controller. In that case, it can only handle authentication requests, pass out GPOs, but it won't be able to make any changes. So if you want to create a new user account, you're going to have to connect to another domain controller. That's good if you need to put a domain controller in like a DMZ or some unsecure location. Now I'm going to set my recovery password, which is unique to this domain controller. When I change the domain admin password, it has no bearing on this. If you want to change this password, you have to use ntdsutil, command line utility, to set that password up. We're not going to do a delegation. We're just going to copy those DNS zones that were created on the first DC. We're going to copy them over here. We are going to deal with delegations when we set up the child domain. If I was doing an install on a remote site, I don't want to replicate all the traffic from the first DC over to the second through that WAN link. That's going to cost me a lot of money. So I could take a backup from the first DC and turn this into a domain controller based on that backup and replicate only the changes since that backup. I'm not going to do it now, but it's an option, especially if you're on a slow WAN link. There's my Active Directory database. That's going to be replicated to every domain controller within our network. This is my log files. When I make a change to the log file. It's a transactional log. And when that change is finalized, it will update the database on my behalf. So I never make changes directly to the database. The Sysvol folder is a junction point or a reparse point. It's kind of like a network share. That's where my group policies are going to be stored. So when a client machine boots up, it's going to connect to the Sysvol folder and download all the group policies. If a user signs in, it will do the same thing. Every domain controller will have a copy of this. When you make a change to one Sysvol folder, you dynamically change it to all Sysvol folders simultaneously. One more thing. Don't copy this Sysvol folder. If you copy it, wherever you paste it, from that point on, that will be part of the replication cycle. So if you paste this on your desktop machine, you're going to create a lot of problems for yourself, and that desktop machine can never be turned off. Don't mess with the Sysvol folder. There's a lot of good information right here on this link about these 3 folders. A review of what I set up. Checking the prerequisites. So now my first domain, contoso.com, are going to have 2 domain controllers. My admin account will not only be my domain admin account, but that account will also be my Schema Admin and my Enterprise Admin. When I create new domains, I will need to sign in with this account to create those domains. Keep in mind that a domain is different than a domain controller. A domain is a security context. A domain controller is a tangible machine that you can actually touch. I just use a domain controller to manipulate my domain. Click Install. I'm going to pause while this is being promoted. Okay, this machine is promoted, so I'm going to sign in. I'm waiting for the bar to stop. Okay, everything is showing up green, so I'm going to go to Tools. I'm going to go to Active Directory Users and Computers. Now, something you probably haven't seen before, I'm going to slide this bar to the right. And what DC do I connect to automatically with this utility? I'm automatically connecting to this machine. So here's all my user accounts. I currently have 2 domain controllers. I haven't explained this yet, but this is a container and this is an OU. For this OU, I can apply policies. I can't apply policies to containers, only OUs. Again, this OU could be like a security context in and of itself. So I could delegate who can manage this OU. If I wanted to, I could right-click here and connect to a different domain controller. So if I wanted to work on DC1 for some reason, I could jump to that DC. So now any changes that I make will occur on DC1, and those changes will eventually get replicated over to DC2. I'm going to close this out. I'm going to go look at my DNS server. And again, I'm automatically connected to DC2, but if I wanted to, I could right-click and connect to a different DC server. Right-click up here. I could connect to a different DNS server. So by default, I'm connecting to the one I'm on. If I install this utility on my Windows 10 machine, it will automatically connect me to the closest DNS server. And I'll show you how it defines closest. So right now, I have all my DNS zones replicated to this machine. Everything is fully configured. So before I move on to the next machine, I'm going to stop this video and upload it so you can start doing this. Guys, keep in mind that in class it takes me a lot longer to do this because I'm keeping all the students at the same pace. This might take you a lot less time on your own than in class because you're not waiting for me to help another student. So just keep that in mind. You can start this lab immediately. So I'm going to stop this video and I will start creating the next video immediately.